And welcome back to the Hot Lap. We are talking Alex Albon versus Sergio Perez. We're also talking the future of Sergio Perez, both in Red Bull and in Formula One. So let's get into it. So essentially, Horner has issued a warning to Sergio Perez, indicating that he has more options. Other than Sergio Perez, we know Daniel Ricciardo, Lando Norris has been rumoured. Also, Yuki Tsunoda. Could Alex Albon also potentially come back to Red Bull? That'd be interesting. Perez also unlikely to continue, according to one former double world champion. Sergio Perez versus Alex Albon. We get into the stats and see how close it is. You may well be surprised. Also, Albon pretty much saying he'd now, with the knowledge he has, would be faster at Red Bull. Perez counteracts with saying he has learnt lessons last year that should hopefully bring him better results this year, particularly at the Qatar Grand Prix as a fairly reflective moment. But let's get into Horner's warning to Sergio Perez. So Christian Horner has essentially challenged Perez with Red Bull, essentially saying we're not short of options. Horner's issued a warning to Perez, saying they're not short of options as the F1 2024 season draws even nearer. Now, in the eyes of some, it says, and us as well, Sergio Perez was quite lucky to get another year in the Red Bull. But it says even if he starts the season with Red Bull, there's no guarantee he will end it there. As we know, Sergio Perez could be in danger. We kind of predicted, if Sergio Perez does not do a good job at the beginning of the year, he may well be replaced by the summer. We had Nick de Vries and the AlphaTauri team replaced. We even had Danny Kvyat replaced at Red Bull for Max Verstappen, who then went on at the Spanish Grand Prix, thanks to the two Mercedes hitting each other to win that race. I mean, what a performance. Who can forget that? So Perez, as we know, he's survived 3 years so far, but he's under pressure to pick up his performances for next year in what could be a more competitive season, at least hopefully more competitive than both 2022 and 2024, with people like Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren in that hunt. And the interesting thing is, and I think Horner will comment on it in a bit, is that gap between Verstappen and Perez. It's potentially quite a big gap. And although they had a very fast car last year that may have negated that in pure performance in the race, if that doesn't happen this year, then Perez could be on a sticky wicket, so to speak, because of that gap. You may well have 3, 4, 5, 6 cars in between Verstappen and Perez, assuming Verstappen qualifies, for example, near the front or on the front row. It could even mean that if you can't close that gap, particularly in qualifying, that 4/10, 5/10, that could mean absolute disaster going, for the race. He may not even make it to the Q3 session, for example. Now, Horner has come out and said being Verstappen's teammate is a very, very tough gig. I think that he's shown real mental strength to be able to cope with that. Now the area that he needs to focus on is improving next year. It's going to be Saturdays, making sure that his average qualifying is a lot closer to Max, because we know he can race and he's got great pace. But we need him to be starting further up the grid, exactly what we've been saying. Particularly, he says, if the grid is going to converge, then we can't afford to have a lot of cars between Max and Checo. The car has been very attractive for other drivers, so we are not short of options, says Horner. Now, asked if any drivers have expressed an interest, Horner has said a little bit of that. I think he's being slightly sarcastic. I'd imagine most drivers on the grid would want in that Red Bull, but the Red Bull boss did say the door is open for Perez to stay beyond 2024. And here's what's interesting. He says, obviously, there's no guarantees of anything, but I think Checo, our driver, is our driver in 2024. If he does a great job, we want to keep him for 2025. So if he does a great job, understandably, I think Checo is our driver for 2024. I think. Is that a Freudian slip from Mr. Horner? I don't know. Doesn't sound overly confident. I don't think he'll be saying, I think our driver for 24 is Max Verstappen, for example. And that potentially leads us into the next story, and that being Mika Hakkinen not being entirely confident about Sergio Perez's future. So we've got Danny Ricciardo waiting in the wings, and Hakkinen has basically come out and said usually one or the other is slower in relation to these two teammates, both Verstappen and Perez. And he says in this case, Perez is slower than Max. It has been pretty clear lately. The two-time world champion told Unibet, and he went on to say, if the slower teammate accepts the situation, is able to communicate well with the media and the team, is able to develop the car, is motivated, and can stay within 3 or 4 tenths of the fast one, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's an okay situation. But he says, if the teammate starts to complain, if he accuses the team of not giving him a good car, is not motivated, the results go up and down, it's not good for the team, that's when the team need to make changes. And he said, I know that having a Mexican driver is important for Red Bull. Mexico is a big market which has its effect on things. He's kind of indicated that maybe the fact that Perez has been Mexican has really, really saved him with potential sponsors, etc. So, as we know, he, as in Sergio Perez, replaced Alex Albon from the Red Bull team. But Alex Albon had something quite interesting to say. I've captured this at FanAmp during, I think, an interview. I'm just going to refresh the page and we'll listen to it. I thought what he said
Max
was quite
qualifying
interesting.
third or fourth, sometimes even fifth. Finishing races generally third or fourth. So then I would be maybe 3-4 tenths off him in some races. That would put me 12th, 11th, and they were disastrous. But the year after, I feel shy or awkward to say this, but the car was first or second almost every race. Lewis and Max were fighting for the title, and Checo was fourth or third or fifth. But the gap between Max was actually, in most cases, bigger than it was when I was Max's teammate. And so I had this I was like, well, he's not having he's a replacement to me. But people shouldn't discredit, as much of a bad year as it was, I was still, in reflection, better than the two previous teammates. The teammate he has currently and the teammate he had before me.
Now, is Alex Albon right? I do think, many think, including myself, he potentially does have a point. So if we just, we've used essentially this website here, motorslat.com, to look at both Alex Albon's 2020 season, his first full year, obviously, with Max Verstappen, and Sergio Perez's full year in 2021. And the difference is interestingly so. I've got it in a potentially a more legible format here. If you have a look, I don't think it's as cut and dry as even Albon or Perez would like to believe. I do think it's a lot. I generally think it's a lot closer. So, I mean, let's have a look. So we got Verstappen versus Albon here, and in 2020, Verstappen versus Albon, Verstappen's average position was third, Albon's average position was seventh. The difference between them was 0.701, basically 7/10 of a second. Now, if you look at to the right of your screen, you have Verstappen versus Perez in 2021. Max Verstappen's average was second, where Perez's average was sixth. When you do the maths, that's the same amount of difference between the two drivers, and 0.672 of a difference as well. Albeit, the argument you can make is significantly that the Red Bull in 2021 was a much better car and more competitive than the Red Bull was in 2020, pretty much as Alex Albon has indicated. And also, Albon was a rookie driver, where Perez, you could argue, was almost in his prime, coming off that win in 2020, going into 2021 with Red Bull saving his bacon, so to speak. And when you look at the differences between the gaps, it's not that much. It's not that much of a difference. And I feel that Alex Albon, as we have seen in Williams, and as we'll learn in a bit later, he had more, I think, scope to improve being a rookie driver. So that's why I think it's really, really interesting when we compare these two drivers. And I don't think there's much of a gap, albeit you could make an argument now that at Williams, and it's difficult because he's been against Albon's been against teammates that are not so good. But the interesting thing is, I would put money on Albon being better now than Sergio Perez in that Red Bull team because of the lessons that Alex Albon has learnt at Williams. But, I mean, let's Albon speak for himself. He says here, this is on racefans.net. With the knowledge I have now, I'd perform better at Red Bull. And Alex Albon believes he would avoid the difficulties he had in his stint at Red Bull with the knowledge that he's gained since then. Albon was promoted, as we know, in the middle of 2019, becoming Verstappen's teammate after just starting 12 races. But he was dropped at the end of the following season, having struggled to perform. Now, after returning to F1 racing successfully, as we know, with Williams, he's done a 180. He's reinvented his career, reignited his career, and big teams are now interested in him. Albon believes that he now has the experience necessary to make more of a similar opportunity in the future. And he says other drivers who went through difficult phases in their careers, like Daniel Ricciardo at McLaren, had a hard time feeling comfortable in the car, he told Motorsport Total. He said, so he tried to make me feel comfortable in the Red Bull. That somehow never really worked out. With the knowledge I have today, he said I could have done it, but in hindsight, it's easy to say. So, I mean, that's Albon basically, being favourable towards him. Why not? Why not would you sell yourself? But I do feel he has a point. Once again, he was very much a rookie going up against Max Verstappen, and who had really established himself in the Red Bull team, whereas Perez was not really much of a rookie. And I think Alex Albon has really grown from his Williams experience. Now, will he be the same driver had he stayed at Red Bull? I don't think so. I think because he lost everything and it looked so bad, he's now hungry for it, and he's almost, reignited that flame that you saw in karting, what made him so good in the junior formulas. But it might not be all. I mean, we've got to let Sergio Perez have some kind of a say. I don't want to be accused of the daily Sergio Perez basher, so to speak. So Perez has, though, he's opened up here on racefans.net. They've got a story about Perez. He's basically saying insists he's learnt lessons from what he believes to be his worst weekend, which was in Qatar, and that he will be stronger for 2024. Now, Sergio Perez said he's confident of being a stronger driver next year after learning a lot from his challenges in 2023. He took a career best finish of second in the Drivers' Championship. Well done, but it was a distant second, let's say. And he's just won 2 Grand Prix. But let's be fair, at the beginning of 2023, he did look like he could take the fight to Max Verstappen up until Miami, and it kind of all went pear-shaped, let's say. So, both in the opening 4 rounds, Verstappen dominated. After the opening 4 rounds, Verstappen pretty much dominated from them. And Perez has said, I think I had some really difficult times for a few months. Let's put it that way, he told Select Media. He went to say, I went from fighting for the championship to be really on a difficult boat and really not having confidence with the car. When that happens, it's really difficult as a driver to exploit it all. So that was becoming a bit of a limitation, he said. Perez admitted that he took some time following the Qatar Grand Prix, where he was classified as 10th after multiple track limit penalties, and Verstappen had won from pole, to sit down in Red Bull's Milton Keynes factory and work through the data with his team to analyse what had basically happened. And he said it was such a hole this year that we really got together after Qatar and we understood a lot of things we were doing with the car, he said. So I think that has been really, really good on our side. I mean, it wasn't bad that it happened, but in a way it was really good because it really strengthened up our team quite a lot. Now, because Qatar was really the worst weekend that I remember in a while in the sport, probably my worst weekend ever in the sport, it was such a bad weekend that I really felt like I cannot be this bad. There's something else going on. So we really took the time to understand what was going on with the car quite a lot. And there we go. So, as we know, it's going to be really interesting. And when asked about, who's going to replace him, he said, to be honest, I was not really thinking of it. He said, as a driver, I think I was more focused on making sure I could enjoy the weekend and be able to have that. If you remember, there were rumours that Perez was going to retire at the Mexican Grand Prix. And he said, I was having some weekends where it was so difficult that they were not fun. I'm here because I still love what I'm doing. And I'm here because I still have a lot of fun, a lot of enjoyment. And that was my main focus, that we really need things to turn them around. I always say it, I don't think of them. I think just that there are a lot of drivers that want just to move up and in a better seat. That's just how the sport runs and operates, he says. That's how part of the sport works. So I'm just focusing on myself, my team, to be the best version of myself as a driver. I mean, it goes on. But Verstappen needs really a shot in the arm, doesn't he? And that shot in the arm needs to be Perez giving him a kick up the backside coming into 2024. We need, if that Red Bull is all dominant again, we need Sergio Perez to up his game from the beginning and give Verstappen a scare. Will that happen? I'm not really so sure, but I want it to happen. Anyway, if you've made it to the end, you are a champion. Thank you so much. Like and subscribe if you can. That would be amazing. We'll speak to you soon. This has been the Hot Lap. Thank you very much.